for joining us this evening. My name is Lauren Lozier, and I am an Associate Director in the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement. I am joined by my colleague Judith Rolls, the Senior Associate Director in the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to welcome each of you to this special edition reunion back to school class featuring Demian Dellinger, Jackie Rasulo Kasulis, Britton Taylor, and Jeff Tonidandel, all of the class of 1998. Before we get started, even though you should all very well be well versed in this, I'm going to go over a few Zoom keeping items. First of all participants have been muted, and we ask that you remain muted throughout the event. If you are comfortable and have not already changed your Zoom name to your first and last name, we ask you to do that now. You can rename yourself by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen, hovering your mouse over your name, and then clicking the more button. Feel free to add your Davidson class year if you have one as well. The chat feature will be available if you have questions for the panel during the Q&A period at the end of this presentation. Please send them through the chat to myself or Judith. We will organize the questions for the moderator to ask the panel. The panelists will not be moderating the chat, so please do not send questions directly to them. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. For optimal viewing, we recommend hovering your mouse at the top right of the black Zoom screen, and you will see view pop up. If you click on that and then select speaker, you should see the panelists pinned to the view, to your screen when we begin. In addition, we have enabled live auto transcription for this call. If you would like to enable this on your end, you can hover over the live transcription button on your screen and subtitles should appear. Please note that the captions are not always accurate, so we ask for grace and understanding. If you have a tech issue, please send a chat to Judith Rolls or myself. Now for our program. Our moderator tonight is Demian Dellinger. Demian is, of course, a member of the class of 1998. He graduated with a degree in psychology, primarily focusing on behavioral neuroscience and cognitive psychology during his time at Davidson. Since '98, Demian has been involved in long-term disaster recovery after Hurricane Floyd in North Carolina, in Katrina in Louisiana, data management, socially responsible finance, public education, shoe design, and community and political organizing. Quite possibly what he hasn't done is beyond me since 1998. He currently lives in Garner, North Carolina, where he serves on the town council and is pursuing various real estate development and financing projects. We will now turn the program over to Demian to introduce the rest of our panelists.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Judith, as well, for all your help getting us organized for this and our reunion in general. Also want to thank my committee members and Liz and Sakira, our chairs, and thanks everyone who's here tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces and see some folks who aren't from our year, which is kind of cool too. I want to thank our panelists for taking the time to do this as well. I have to write everything down, so I'm going to read what I wrote. But before we get into the actual introduction of our panelists, I wanted to set the backdrop and context for the conversation we're going to have tonight and why we chose this topic of liberal arts education. The reason is the broader cultural assault on education in this country, public and higher education in particular, the growing momentum to erode the real and perceived benefits of higher education. Liberal arts education, both public and private, is directly in the crosshairs on this battlefield because it pits economic and monetary value and returns of higher education against the value of civic fortitude, institutional integrity, and learning and knowledge as inherently beneficial to the character of an individual and by virtue civil society. We often talk about character arcs and career arcs and the arc of history, but if you look closely, and if I remember my geometry right, arcs aren't smooth lines. Arcs are made up of points. And in our life stories, these are decision points. And some of these decision points we create, and some of them are imposed upon us. With these decision points, when these decision points appear, when a choice is to be made, what are the fundamental elements of that decision? What impact does a liberal arts education, a liberal arts experience have on those decision points? And what is its current relevance? So that's what we'll be talking about tonight. And we'll be looking at that question through the lives and careers of our panelists. I'm gonna do something a little unorthodox because I'm gonna make my introduction super short so we can avoid spoilers. So if you don't know what these folks are doing now, we'll get there. So we have Jackie, she's a lawyer. Britton, he's an advertising guy. And Jeff is in the food, beverage, and hospitality industries. With that, I'm gonna let our panelists introduce themselves in kind of a unique way. And we're gonna go back to what I'm calling the Wonder Years, which is an obscure sort of television reference that you probably have to be of our age to remember. So we're gonna go back to, since we're tracing the arc of careers and impacts on liberal arts, we're gonna go back to 1994. So you're a senior in high school, you're just about to graduate or just graduated or deciding on college. Tell us, what city you're in, what state you're in, what interests and activities you're involved in. What did you think you were gonna be grow up? What you thought you were gonna be when you grow up, and maybe your background and how you found Davidson and how you chose Davidson and what liberal arts meant to you then, if anything. And I'm gonna start with Jackie. And I'm gonna start with Jackie because my memory of Jackie at Davidson is she was a ringleader. She was she was kind of, right? Am I right? She was kind of like always making things happen. So we're gonna start with you, Jackie. Go back to 1994 and tell us about Jackie.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's really good to see so many familiar faces. Jackie in 1994 was not a ringleader. I will tell you that much. I grew up in Bradenton, Florida, a small town, west coast of Florida. I went to Manatee High School, which is a public school, 2,400 students, 5A football champions, like very Friday Night Lights, very different, obviously, than Davidson. I was very shy, introverted, really just focused very much on my academics. I did very traditionally nerdy things like run the yearbook. And so, my dad's a doctor, and I thought I was going to go to college and be a doctor. There were no lawyers in my family. It was really sort of all that I knew. And so that's what I thought my career path would be. How did I end up at Davidson? So I looked at only at small liberal arts schools. I really wanted to go to a place that was sort of going to get me out of Bradenton, get me out of Florida, right? Like just broaden my horizons, and where I could just be a sponge, right? Learn about all sorts of things. And that I would just have the opportunity to reinvent myself a little bit, which apparently I was successful in doing. And so why Davidson? I actually thought Davidson was too small when I was first looking at the school, but I was looking more like in the 5,000 range because my high school was so big. But then when I visited, I went to admitted students weekend, and I just walked around campus, and everyone I met was amazing. And I realized that I didn't need 5,000 people. 1,600 of these people would be more than enough for me to have a really meaningful college experience. And I just ultimately went with my gut. I just knew that that's where I needed to go to college. And I think my guts never failed me, and it didn't fail me with that decision either. So that was Jackie in 1994 with like very big, curly, frizzy hair, which is not what I have now.
Mr. Britton.
Yeah, 1984, I had a cool F-150 with a big "No Fear" sticker on the back. Really cool. I was in Reno, Nevada. I'm from the South. My family's from Virginia and South Carolina, and I still have family in North Carolina, but we moved when I was in junior high to high school in Reno. Went to a large public school, key club president, played soccer. My senior year, I broke my leg, and through the rehab process, I decided I wanted to go into sports medicine. So just like Jackie, I knew I was going to be a doctor. And I think somebody had told me that Davidson was the place to go if you wanted to, that their acceptance rates for medical school were pretty good. And I was honestly surprised that I got into Davidson. It's the best school that I applied to academically. I don't know if being from the West Coast helped, and they needed to fill their West Coast quota. But I got in and I visited the school and I loved the campus just like Jackie, and it seemed like a nice place to go, and I went for it. Jeff.
Love it. Here it is. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I too public school my whole life until my senior year. And that's because I played tennis. I was pretty addicted to it, played all the time. Is pretty much all I did. And I had two older brothers that went to Davidson, so my choice was kind of made for me. I had misgivings about the size of Davidson. My public high school was 3,000 kids, and it's like, how am I going to go to a smaller school? But just seeing my brothers, groups of friends, and
Oh man.
Oh, all right. Oh,
No.
he's done. He's done.
Is that enough?
This is where I step in as moderator and keep the show going, I guess, huh? So we'll get Jeff back. So let's go to what I'm calling the day after, which is another obscure sort of television reference that is actually not too happy, but we're going to go to 1998 and the days and weeks after graduation. Where were you going? What was your first job? What unexpected? Oh, Jeff's back.
so sorry about that. My mom calls at the same time every night and just keeps calling over and over.
You're still on. You're still on.
There we have it. So my good application story, though, I think pre-med was a thought till I got grades at Davidson. Didn't work out. But my good application story was Nancy Cable Wells, who was the admissions director for a long, long time, came to my private high school. And I didn't go to any of the information sessions because I was actually at Davidson last weekend, and so she's like, pulls me out of class. She's like, why didn't you come to the information session? And I'm like, hey, well, I've been there 10 times this year. And she's like, oh, well, we got your application and you're in. So she told me right away. And I was like,
that's cool.
Well, great. Talk to Coach Frank, I'm coming. That's great. And so I kind of had the heads up ahead of time, but I never told my parents. And then when I sloughed off and didn't really finish any other applications, my parents were kind of wondering why. But anyways, I ended up at Davidson, and it was a great spot for me.
Well, welcome back, Jeff. So we're going to go to 1998, and like I said, the days, sort of weeks after graduation. Where are you going? Like, what's your first job? Are you going to school? But also, what unexpected academic experiences or life experiences did you have at your time at Davidson that shifted or solidified your direction? I think Jeff already mentioned his grades, kind of got him in a different direction. Were there professors or classes that, when you look back from that point of graduation, looking forward to looking back, what was sort of a decision-making point in your career? I mean, at your time at Davidson, that was a conscious change in who you are and wanted to be. Let's go to Jeff.
Yeah, I think from that standpoint, there's lots of ways to look at school, and where you go to school to get a certain job and you're really focused on that. And I think early on, I learned, after having a few poor grades in some classes I didn't want to take, that I should just start taking the stuff that I loved and really cared about. And even though, I think being a dork and being really into Nietzsche and political theory and those kind of things, it wasn't really giving me a whole lot of job skills, but I think it ends up paying off later. But just finding that stuff that I was really, really passionate about and embracing it and going that direction really kind of helped me out and helped me kind of blossom as a junior and senior, and just kind of changing that direction. But I think it was a weakness when I went for my first job interview in '98, and somebody asks you, well, what skills are you bringing to this job? And and I think you don't have the perspective then as a senior that's just gone through this rigorous liberal arts stuff to say, well, I can, you're like, well, I can read Nietzsche, and but that, that's not helpful. So having some of those, things and I think those weaknesses, though, kind of put me in a direction that we can, further talk about. But
and I think coming out of Davidson, you kind of have that feeling of you can probably do anything, but
yeah, exactly.
the world's not looking at you thinking you can do anything.
Yes.
Britton, where were
Hey,
you
buddy.
going? What changed?
Well, I didn't have my shit together once school ended. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I think I went to Charleston for the summer and just goofed off with some buddies. And then Jonathan Coulomb, who was a year ahead of us, his father ran a private school in Richmond, Virginia, and they had an opening spot for a teacher position, 7th grade English, which was one of the worst years of my life. I'm just about to be a teacher of 12-year-old girls, especially, who are just nightmares. But thinking back on my time at Davidson, yeah, I know I wanted to be a doctor. It took, I think my first semester, I took chemistry and got a D-, which for someone who breezed through high school, that was a pretty big wake-up call. It sort of rejiggered my perspective of things. But I'd say there's probably two things that sort of at least planted a seed of maybe what I wanted to do in the future. The first was like a writing class with Elizabeth Mills. I think just reminded me that, I'm inherently a very creative person and I'm happy when I'm expressing myself. And I just really enjoyed writing. And then I took a film class with Kuzmanovich. And as part of that class, we got to make our own film. And just again, like the act of creating something from scratch and getting to explore and experience that emotional high, I think just stuck with me and definitely was something that I carried forward as I moved out of teaching later on.
Ejected yourself out of teaching.
Yeah.
Is it ringleader Jackie time?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Jackie.
So I am not a doctor, obviously. So first couple of years I was doing pre-med. I had taken a bunch of history classes in high school. I had like a bunch of AP credits. And so I didn't take history right away at Davidson because I thought it was not useful to take those. It was just sort of like a hobby. And I had the credits. And then my most sort of formative experience at Davidson is that I participated in the Davidson in India program and my study abroad beginning of my junior year. And that was incredibly challenging. I had never been outside the United States before, other than like a cruise, which doesn't count. So I was just sort of thrust into the deep end and, really was challenged. Like outside my comfort zone does not begin to explain how far outside of my comfort zone I was. And I had taken history of India with Dr. Joe Thomas, in order to qualify for the program. And I realized, having taken that class, how important it was to understand history, right? And to how it was so relevant to understanding current events and what was going on around you. And so, eyes were very much opened. Also just gave me perspective on the world, right? That not everybody has the opportunities that we have, that you could be sort of born, sort of random luck. You're born into the family that you're born into and have the opportunities that you ultimately are given. So to me, that was a hugely, hugely transformative experience for me. It also just showed me I could do that, right? I could move to the other side of the world. It was really before email. There was like a postal strike, like you couldn't get mail, like there was like a dengue fever outbreak. I mean, it was like a disaster on so many levels, but it was a very well-run program, I will say that. But it was just, talk about feeling completely isolated. It's not, we got one 15-minute phone call once a week. That was it with our families. So I came back and I was like, I want to be a history major. This is what I want to do. I don't want to do this pre-med thing anymore. Like I just want to follow my passion. And so I took like any history class I could take. I had no specialty. I had no options for specialty. I just had to like do it. And I graduated. My parents were like, you can switch your major. You just have to graduate on time. That's it. That's all we care about. We're not paying for anything else. So I was able to get enough credits to graduate on time with the history major. And I remember distinctly telling people that I was not going to be a lawyer. I did not want to go to law school. I had no interest. So what was I going to do? So I'm actually really happy to see that Dorothy Peterson Vollmer is on, because, a bunch of different companies recruited on campus, right? And this company called Info NXX recruited at Davidson. They had some Davidson alums, Lee Rowden worked there. And they loved Davidson grads. It was like these two young guys from like early 30s from Wharton. They started, it was a startup telecommunications company that specialized in providing 411 services for these new things called cell phones. So they had these like 5 call centers at the time, like 300-person call centers all throughout the country. And they just like swooped up these Davidson grads, Dorothy being one of them, and just like shipped us out to these call centers to run these call centers at like ridiculously young ages. And so, yeah, because I was like, hey, I want to do business. Like I want to, be an entrepreneur. Like let's learn how to run a business. And like, boy, did we ever. So I packed up my Jeep when we graduated. I drove cross country. I rented an apartment on Sunday in Riverside, California, and started work on Monday. And ran within like 6 months, was running a 300-person call center as a 22-year-old, which was absurd. Just as older I get, the more ridiculous it is. And I'm sure Dorothy feels the same way. We had these like pagers, right? That we get like paged all the time with our call center stats.
You're making us sound really old.
It's so old. It's so old. I mean, that's the 30 years ago, right? 1994, but super pressurized environment. But like, again, this is sort of the liberal arts education in action, right? Because it was just like, you got to figure this out. Like, just figure it out, get in there, just think outside the box. You're smart, right? Like we value that you're able, like your education, and that you're able to just sort of problem solve and make it work. And that's what we did. I mean, I think every Davidson grad crushed it at this company. It was honestly like, I'm a lawyer. I ran an office, the DOJ, and like nothing was more stressful than the couple of years that I worked at Info and XX. I can say that hands down. So anyway, I was dating this guy who was applying to business school, and I was like, I really want to go back to school. And then he was like, have you thought about law school? Because you're constantly arguing with me. So, maybe you should rethink that. And I took an LSAT and I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to give this law thing a whirl. And so I applied, and I ended up at Columbia Law School, which is where I ultimately graduated from. And as you can imagine, a liberal arts education lends itself very well to law school. And then that was my trajectory.
Sounds like your life has gotten easier and easier. You did mid-90s India, right? India's hard now.
Early.
Like if you get out there, yeah.
Early.
So we're going to move now to sort of the 2000s to 2010s, which kind of depends on your own arc, right? But one of the things that jumped out at me is this figure it out thing you just said, Jackie, which I think is one of the strengths of sort of liberal arts education. So I'm going to ask Britton first. It's going to ask specific questions, but I'll make it general so you can kind of fill it in. What sort of career or life changes and decisions did you make in sort of really the past 20 years? And did they take you deeper into what you're doing or in another direction? I think with you went deeper. And what informed your decision? And what were the advantages or disadvantages of a liberal arts education in any big decisions you had to make sort of throughout the past 20 years?
Yeah. So I was teaching 7th grade in Virginia. That didn't work out. I was done as soon as I could be done. There was an article in the paper about a graduate program at VCU called the Brand Center. It's just an advertising school. I'd say it's probably the best advertising school in the country now, but it was fairly new at the time. And I don't know, I just kind of took a leap and went for it. And I had interned at an advertising agency in Charlotte one summer at Davidson. So I kind of got the sense that advertising might be a fun career to go into. It always seemed interesting and didn't seem too staid or boring. So I did that program through VCU. I got an internship at an advertising agency in San Francisco, the agency that did Got Milk. I worked there once school finished for about 5 or 6 years. I worked at another agency in Seattle. That was a big global holding company. And then finally migrated to Portland, where I worked at White & Kennedy, which is considered by many to be sort of the mecca of advertising, at least in the United States. And they've done all the Nike work throughout the years, the stuff that put Nike on the map. And I was lucky enough to work on Old Spice and kind of reboot that brand, did The Man on the Horse, Kentucky Fried Chicken, brought back the Colonel Sanders and had a bunch of different actors playing him in that role. And yeah, thinking about just the benefits of having a liberal arts education in advertising, I think, creativity is often about just combining things that haven't been combined before, bringing two disparate things together to create something new. And I think having a liberal arts background gives you the ability to draw from things that other people who may be specialized in something don't have in their repertoire. So I think that definitely served me well. in advertising, where you're often trying to just create something completely new and create something that surprises and delights people.
And is broadly culturally relevant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like having that feel for what is kind of the zeitgeist of your market or a bigger market. So Jackie, what sort of were some big life changes over your career, decision points or challenges, and how did you sort of reflect back on how you'd grown to make whatever decision you needed to make?
Yeah, so like I said, I went to law school and I figured out pretty early I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And actually, as I'm just sort of reflecting back on Davidson, I also, for the first time at Davidson, explored my interest in theater and drama, which I was far too shy, right? And self-conscious to do in high school. But I was able to explore that interest and actually have been able to use it now in my career as a trial lawyer, right? Being in a courtroom and having to pivot and basically perform, right, for all different audiences. And so I graduated from Columbia. I went to Kirkland and Ellis as a litigation associate in New York City. And my first summer of law school, I actually moved home and worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, in Tampa, Florida for my first summer. And I was like, oh, I like Law and Order. Like, let me give this a whirl. Now, like this, I'm not serious. This is just for fun. And then I just loved it. I thought it was really amazing. I felt like I was really, giving back to the community and vindicating victims' rights and things along those lines. And so I knew I wanted to go to the Department of Justice. Eventually, I paid for law school on my own. So I, lots of debt and sort of had to do the private law firm thing for a while. And then applied to all sorts of U.S. attorney's offices. And then I ended up at the U.S. attorney's office in the Eastern District of New York, which is in Brooklyn. It covers sort of half of New York City and Long Island. And, I think one of the reasons why I ended up at the DOJ too is just liberal arts, but also Davidson, right? Sort of the honor code and this like really, really, emphasis on having a strong moral compass and community service, I think was very much instilled in me at the school. And so I told my firm I was only going to go for 3 years to be an AUSA. And I ended up being there for almost 14 years.
Oh.
And yeah, so I started off as an organized crime prosecutor for 4 years. I got to do all sorts of like murder trials and sort of really interesting work like that. And then I segued into being a white collar crime prosecutor. So people who'd gotten their life savings stolen and defrauded, and, people who had opportunities to do really good things with their skills and instead, took things from people and defrauded them. And so I really loved doing that work. Like my claim to fame during that time was I was the lead prosecutor in the trial of Martin Shkreli, Pharma Bro, for securities fraud violations. And so that was a complete circus and a whole separate story for another time. So I ran the business and securities fraud section. I then was asked to stay on for a little bit of time to be chief of the criminal division, and then COVID hit. So as you can imagine, it threw the whole world, for a loop. But we had, constitutional obligations to people who we had arrested, right? I mean, there were all sorts of issues going on, new sorts of crimes that we were sort of on the cutting edge of prosecuting. And then, so I stayed on for a longer time, and I ultimately became acting U.S. attorney for the office. And so again, like where does sort of Davidson factor into all of this? Well, like one of the things I was known for is being just creative in my charging, right? And really sort of investigating to the ends of the earth, like a little obsessively, but then also really kind of trying to figure out like what would be sort of the best legal framework. And, our office, I supervise like the Nexium case, the big sex cult case, the FIFA bribery case was also out of our office. R. Kelly, the most recent conviction. Yeah, I got to do the press conference for that, which was really awesome. So, but again, like each one of those cases is just sort of a novel application of law to try to find a way to really address wrongful conduct, right? And to, bring people to justice. And so I had an amazing run. It was a blast. And about a year ago, I basically ran out of supervisory opportunities. And so I had to segue into private practice, and I'm back at Kirkland and Ellis, and I'm a partner in the government regulatory and internal investigations group. So yeah, so I do white collar defense now, and I would love to see all of you, but hopefully not in the context of you needing me professionally.
I think the thing that's really interesting when you mentioned the acting piece, right? And that's sort of one of those throwaway sort of things people think about in college now. Like, oh, there's no use for that. How is that useful? And like you've just like literally nailed like how important that, especially for someone who was not an actor, for someone who was shy, for you to develop that, it actually opened up a lot of opportunities for you that you couldn't really predict. That's really, really cool. That's
Yeah,
really
I mean, I
cool.
honestly like just connected those dots as I was talking. No, seriously, because I don't, like I did like crazy acting things at Davidson that made like, standing up and talking in a courtroom, not nearly as challenging or as absurd, to be honest.
So let's hop over to Jeff. You seem to have taken sort of some big twists and turns in 20 years.
2008 was a huge year for me. I had a really cool job. I was handling sponsorship for a NASCAR team, and having a pretty good time as being young, traveling all over the country, and hanging out with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and putting really big marketing programs together, and basically selling stickers on a race car for $15 million. But it was a really, really cool job. I kind of got there after Davidson, went to business school, got my MBA. I really loved Charlotte, and came back to Charlotte, and that's kind of where I landed and was working for about 5 years. But I married another Davidson person, class of '99, so one year younger than me. And we were kind of, as soon as we got married, we got to the point where I just felt like I can't travel 35 weekends out of the year and have a family. I can't like keep up these hours. I can't do this, and I can't work for somebody I don't really like. So it kind of, came down to that. And she was in a similar situation, although, she was doing really well in her career, but we took a hiatus. We just took a break. I got the race team fully funded for the time being. And, we just took a break for 9 months, traveled around the world. We didn't really know where we were going. We were just kind of visiting friends here and there and traveling all around, spent a lot of time in Europe, and then made it through Korea, Japan, all the way back around. But it was on that trip that really tried to soul search and come back and figure out, like, and of course the Davidson dorkiest way possible, with trying to fill in your goals and what do I care about in life, and all these things every day for 9 months.
Yeah.
And talking to my wife about it, and came back to Charlotte, and everything we had kind of thought on our trip kind of went by the wayside because Charlotte imploded. Kind of the month or two that we got back, like Wachovia goes under, and all the banks are and nobody has a job. And so I just in a situation where I'm like, but I have all these dreams and things I want to do. And it's like, I'm going to have to go back to what I was doing before to make a living. And I was just kind of like, F it. I'm going to go open a restaurant. I want to have my own business. And I was really passionate about hospitality, and like just kind of like learned that from doing all the things of like, I really care about making sure people have an awesome time and curating things, and much more so than, building marketing programs for a Fortune 500 company. I would much rather be like, hey, Pete Coors is coming to the race this weekend. I know he's going to have an awesome time, and I'm going to set everything up great. And so just kind of learning that those are the things I cared about. And then so we just kind of jumped in. But I think the creativity, I think, is a common theme of we built our restaurant differently. We kind of don't think like restaurant people. The creativity is big. I think the honor code stuff is big. That's been like a premise of what we do. We actually are one of the few restaurants that like when people pay with credit cards, because it's easier to trace all of the money and less people can steal from us, and you pay taxes on it, and it's like, it's fine, but it just is, so I think those, you're finding the same core principles, in all of us in all these discussions, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I'm coming across some different themes. I'll wrap up at the end. So now let's go to sort of today and tomorrow, and then sort of weave in sort of contemporary liberal arts education. So for each of you, where are you now? We kind of gotten there, and we're almost there. What are you doing? Kind of gotten there. Your current bio, what's your personal empire? So you're kind of already there. You already kind of summed that stuff up. So let's jump really to thinking about your field and your industry. And what's the relevance and impact of liberal arts as a pipeline of educated minds and talent to your field and your community? So not just your field, but also the kind of the community of people around you. And I'll start with Jackie. We'll go back to Jackie. You did some teaching as well, and so you've kind of had access to students, and so kind of it's kind of a reference point. But think about liberal arts in your field and its relevance or lack thereof. What does it mean now?
Yeah, I mean, liberal arts education is so crucial to what I do. Just again, because so much of being a good lawyer is to be able to be analytical and be open-minded and to be able to learn very quickly all sorts of industries and legal standards. And so I don't frankly know how you do this successfully without having a liberal arts background. I think it would be very challenging to do, and just separate apart from like learning how to write, and research and be an oral advocate. I mean, all of those sorts of things very much are relevant to a liberal arts education. I do teach. I taught at NYU for a couple of years, teaching federal criminal prosecution. I also teach now at Penn, University of Pennsylvania Law School, and I teach white collar crime there. And I really love it. And it's, again, I think goes back to how vested our teachers were, our professors were in us, and how they were very focused on fostering all of this in us. And it's something that I try to do as a professor. Like it just makes me feel young. But although they're making me really feel old now, like we've jumped the shark on that. Now I just feel old. But yeah, I think it's just so important because it's not just about, what you learn on a piece of paper. It's like the development of the human being, right? The person. And being able to, deal with all sorts of people, right? Understand all different perspectives, understand that everybody's like you. I mean, these are all the sorts of things that a liberal arts education fosters. So, everyone's like freaking out over AI and this and that. And are we going to be like rendered obsolete? And I think we all keep going back to, no, this is, this is such an, as with most professions, very, very nuanced and very much requires sort of a higher level of thinking that AI does not have. And, again, a lot of that level of thinking and success in doing so, I think very much comes from that sort of an education. So for me, like law, it's very, very relevant and like obviously useful.
So go to Jeff now in sort of your transition and being an entrepreneur, and you have a lot of different types of employees and clientele, and so
if you saw my day-to-day, I mean, you guys, everybody asks what I do in a day, and you guys would laugh because it's super random. It's very much like solving problems, and like could be changing light bulbs or whatever, but it really is. I think the pandemic and being a restaurant owner shows you where liberal arts education is super important. Is like, hey, look what we threw at you. What are you going to do with this? And so all those problem solving skills, all the ability to do research, and I mean, it's crazy that I've never gone to cooking school and I lead the culinary for 5 restaurants, and it's because I'm willing to just do so much research, read everything I can, check out 100 YouTube videos. And I think the rigor at Davidson has also helped that. There's stuff that I think I would put up with and I would do, and the fortitude to, go forward, which is, puts you at a different level to solving these problems, and just your willingness to kind of attack these. But yeah, I think as we so right now we're sitting at, we have 5 restaurants in Charlotte. All 5 are different concepts. We want each one to have a sense of place, which I think Davidson does, and it has that uniqueness and specialness. And we want each one to kind of like build this family and have that environment for the employees. And I think these are still a lot of concepts that, we learned at Davidson and kind of are embedded in you. And so that's kind of what we did. And we also, one of the reasons, so we've gotten a lot of acclaim. We were one of the top 10 best new restaurants in Bon Appetit this year, and top 15 in Esquire magazine, and all that's wonderful. Puts a lot of people in the seats and creates a lot of revenue. But it's because, we learn to, make our own tables. We have our own wood shop. We, it's just like we do the craziest stuff. Or, like somebody's like, no, we can't do that. And I'm like, for the new restaurant we're building, we have this crazy molding plan. So of course, what do I do is I, sent $10,000 to some guy in China and got a CNC machine and started our own wood shop to make the stuff for our restaurant. Like that's just the kind of crazy stuff that you do. But when you know how to problem solve and handle all that adversity, I think it, comes to light in really cool ways and lets you be really creative and do what you want to do. Go ahead, Britton. It's all you.
Oh, thank you so much. What the hell am I doing now, guys? Let's see. I started my own company about 2 years ago during the pandemic. It's called Tritton Baylor Strategic Industries. One of the cool things that when you start your own company, you can just name it whatever the hell you want. I really went for it. I do strategic consulting, mostly for big brands, also for some agencies, advertising agencies. But one of the cool things about, I think, my Davidson experience is that it gave me a lot of curiosity and just a lot of intellectual flexibility. So right now I'm working on a project with H&M, the fashion retailer. I was in Stockholm all last week, meeting with their executives, trying to help them kind of reboot their brand. 2 weeks before that, I was in Texas working with Chili's restaurant chain.
I got some ideas for you.
You got to turn that around, Britton.
Yeah,
Chili's in Texas. That's tough.
Yeah. So they've got some work to be done, but I've got some good friends there, and we're going to turn it around, and we're going to give Jeff a run for his money.
Love it.
Watch out. Here comes Chili's, Jeff.
I mean, I've worked on all
Dark
kinds
horse.
of random stuff, from restaurants to fashion brands to like potato chips to deodorants, you name it. So definitely having the range there. And then I think just like discipline, and I think second guessing people's assumptions and opinions, and having I'll use Jeff's word, fortitude, to kind of question assumptions and convictions, and to try to push people out of their comfort zone. So I think all of those are skills that I learned at Davidson. And then on the community front, I'm also, now that I work for myself, I just have more freedom. So I'm now an elected official with the local Democratic Party here in Portland.
Oh, congratulations.
So yeah, grassroots politics is a tricky one, but I do think Davidson did instill me with the value of community and the importance of rallying people around things that you believe in. So just this week, fighting for school board candidates and whatnot. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Love it.
This just in, bonus question for Britton Taylor.
Uh-oh.
So you've been in advertising for over 20 years. The landscape of media and advertising has changed drastically in both their terms of means and speed and content, all with the goal of snagging attention. What's the single best improvement to the craft of advertising and marketing? And what is the single worst consequence of these changes?
What's the best improvement to marketing?
Yeah, in the past 20 years.
TikTok.
TikTok is truly addictive and incredible. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, I think the best thing that's happened is also the worst, which is just the level of personalization you can deliver with advertising, which is obviously enabled by the amount of data that companies are vacuuming up from everything you're doing on the internet. It's given us an incredible ability to be focused with media dollars and a very good understanding of the people that we're trying to reach and the exact specific messages and behavioral nudges that we need to make to get people to make decisions in service of the capitalist machine. And I don't know if I need to go into the consequences of that, but a lot of that stuff ain't great. I don't know if you've read about any of the social media companies and what they're doing.
What is this capitalism you speak
I'm
of?
not sure.
All right, bonus question for Jeff. So as you've built sort of your food and destination empire, what was sort of the critical mass point for your growth? I mean, there's always a struggle when you're an entrepreneur starting something new, where it's struggle, and then there's a point where it actually gets over the hump. What was sort of the get over the hump point for you and what you were doing?
The biggest thing for us has been, so I guess when we opened our third place, Haberdish, which is our fried chicken and cocktail place, that was the point that Jamie, my Davidson graduate wife, was able to quit her job and join our team. And it really, like, the productivity that we have together of, like, we put the kids to bed at 8 and then we have a lot of time to talk things over and work things through. And also, I think I do a pretty decent job running the company, but one of the reasons I do is I have a lot of strong people like my wife to kind of keep me in check and help that. But yeah, her ability just to, like, kind of jump in, and the trust that we have, and the trust you have too of, it's kind of when you work with another Davidson person, like, you have the expectations, and you know that they're going to do what they're supposed to do and get it done on time. And yeah, it's just those kind of like trust points. But that was really big for us, was adding her to the fray, because she crushes it and leads all of our branding, marketing. We do so many cool things together. During the pandemic, we designed our own plates for Supperland. So we hired a designer, and we're like, we're going to make, like, we didn't like any of the plates that were out there. So we're like, we're going to go design our own. And we're like, we want them to, look like this. So we just do wild stuff like that, but we do it together and we have a blast. So
that's cool. And now, Jackie, you have a bonus question as well.
Oh, wow.
All right, I'm prepared.
So,
So you've been a part of some very high profile cases, to say the least. What gives you the mettle to hammer through the pressure and the scrutiny?
oof, that is a very, very good question. So I think I've sort of talked a little bit about having already been in these situations early on, and at Davidson in particular, that I think really pushed me. And frankly, I wasn't, I didn't sort of handle those situations always like brilliantly and really well. I mean, I think I cried for the first 3 weeks I was in India. I'm not kidding. Like, it was like the only thing that kept me from coming home was like purely pride. I really, really struggled. And so, but I pushed through, right? And I came out the other side and I was, better for it. And so I had a couple of those instances. Dorothy and I went through the ringer in terms of the sort of pressurized situation we were in with info. And then, but each time you do it, right, it's sort of the reps, you get a little bit more confidence, and, you realize that, like, come hell or high water, you'll make it out the other side. And then, when it came to the Shkreli case, like, I had to give the rebuttal in that case, and, which was like the last jury address. And we went up against Ben Brafman, who's like a legend in the white collar bar. He's just so phenomenal. And the jury was so enthralled by him. And there was so much pressure. It was such a circus every single day. I even remember, like, I would do a direct exam, and I was questioning a witness, and I would sit down and look at my phone, and I would have people texting me saying, like, so-and-so reporter on Twitter says he didn't understand this question that you asked. And it was horrible. Like, we had to do like a media blackout, because it was just like everything we said was reported on and people were tweeting about it. It was like huge social media focus. And so I think you just kind of have to, like, go into yourself and really dig deep. And then just, when you get going, you just get going. And, you kind of like go into a fugue state, and then you come out the other side and, like, you've made it. So, but it's a, you know, I can't say it's like, oh, you know, it's very easy. And, you know, I've honed this skill to be able to deal with these very pressurized situations, really hard. But again, the more that you do it and the more that you realize, you know, you can be successful, and, you know, shows you that you can. And the next time you do it, maybe it's just a little bit easier. So, so yeah, that's the short.
I think Britton can probably relate to that sort of when you get involved in local politics, there's a lot of that. You got to steel yourself and kind of just focus on what you know is right. So I don't see any questions. Did we have any? I didn't see any questions in my question document. But I did want to kind of.
They're coming in the chat. Fast and Furious, Damian. We can't get them
looking
in
in the chat.
I know they just started there, so it's okay. But they want to hear you answer the questions.
No, I'm the moderator. That's moderator privilege. I don't have to answer any questions. But I do want to kind of, and I may answer some of them, but it's really interesting in talking because really sort of the things that kind of I'm pulling out from all of your conversation about the core of liberal arts, and some of it's probably a core of who you are choosing Davidson, right? There's always that nexus of kind of like Harry Potter, like the wand chooses the wizard, right? So it's like it's a combination of Davidson being the place it is and us being the people we are to choose Davidson, right? But it creates something. And the real themes I'm seeing are this sort of figure it out, research, problem solve, right? There's sort of this, we can figure this out. Wherever you are, you can figure it out. The other is being about others and community in the sense of justice and other people. Every one of you on here, it's like that's a motivating factor. Your perspective is not just your perspective. It's what are other people's perspective? And it's like you have your perspective, their perspective, and you're driven by your own passion to find the right place in all this other space, right? And considering other people's concerns and values. And so it's, again, it's a chicken and egg. I don't know, like, which comes first, but it's definitely a theme that is like, regardless of what career you're in or what you're pursuing, like all these things are there. That's really interesting. You guys are interesting. Oh my God. I had no idea. Oh, and I see questions. What is your view about, I don't know if I can read these.
Describe.
I'll answer David
Oh,
Back's
I got it,
question
I
here
got
at the end. What
Go for
class
it.
I wish I had taken? I wish I had taken more theater classes.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped doing theater in high school because I thought it wasn't cool. I didn't want to be cool.
How'd that work out for you, Brendan?
Yeah. And I've only now picked up performing again. Now I'm actually doing a storytelling event here tonight. But yeah, I wish I had stuck with it and done theater. I think that would have been a lot of fun.
I feel like the speech class I took because I was trying to boost my GPA, but was one of the best classes that I use every day, you know? So very, very happy with that one.
I think that's one of those big decision points at Davidson, is that first couple of semester grades are gonna help you choose where you're going and where you're not going.
Yeah, exactly.
So Mr. Martin 73 says, what is it in your view about what's unique that happens at Davidson that leads to all you've described? Who wants to answer that?
I mean, I think we've hit on these themes a couple of times, but I think it's the liberal arts education combined with this sort of emphasis on community service and strong moral compass. My husband always sort of like kids me about the honor code. He's always like, Davidson's a place where you can look a man in the eye. Like he always like jokes about that. But it's true. I mean, it's something that like we all kind of buy in, you know, we buy into, and I think we feel really strongly about and passionately about, and I think support. So I think it's both those, and just, you know, the freedom to let you explore at a young sort of vulnerable age, right? Like create a safe space for you to figure out who you are. and meet all different kinds of people and explore your interests. For someone like me who didn't feel like I had the ability to do that in high school, I think Davidson is really unique in allowing people to feel comfortable enough to do that. So I think it's sort of the, it's the liberal arts experience, but I think the overlay of community service, moral compass, and then I really do think it's a special place in the way that it really just allows people to explore who they are and grow.
Yeah. I was thinking about that earlier today, and how, college was a place you could go away to and be isolated, and there were guardrails in a lot of ways. You didn't feel like there were, but there were. And some of that was just by virtue of the technology, right? So you could mess up at college, and you've messed up in college, but you mess up now, the whole world can see you mess up. And I kind of wonder what the impact of that is on the freedom to really explore yourself and your interests and make mistakes that don't end up crippling you, right? And how much it leads to maybe conformity. And I can't answer that because I don't go to college anymore, but you think about it, it's a much more safer space than you realized even at the time.
Yeah. Especially as we were all together, right? Like everyone lived on campus. It was just a really insular community. So yeah, I mean, there are plenty of things I think about, like, God, if that had been posted on social media, I probably would not be doing, would not have ended up where I ended up, to be perfectly honest.
It really, and again, puts in perspective, like, those abroad years that people took. That's a different type of abroad year than you do now. Like, you were really going away. You could fall off the face of the earth.
I mean, I remember like the door was locked for the room to do your 15-minute call, and we literally ripped the grating off the bottom of the door and like crawled under it to be able to answer the like that is how isolated we were, right? Or you'd get like snail mail, right? Like airmail, and you'd write back and forth. I mean, there's something, it's kind of sad that that's been lost to some extent, but yeah, like you're like really feel like you're on the other side of the world, which you just don't have anymore. Vast majority of places.
So I think we're kind of reached the end. I don't know was Lauren going to come in and do some reunion stuff?
I am.
Okay.
But y'all, thank you so much, Demian, Jackie, Britton, and Jeff, for taking the time to speak with us today and leading us in this conversation. You have given us so much to think about, and I, for one, have thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of you. I am so impressed. It is an honor to work with your class, and so thank you so much for all of what you've given us this evening. Just a huge, big thank you to the class of 1998 Reunion Committee for sponsoring this event. And just so you all are aware, a follow-up email will be sent in the next few days with the contact information for the panelists, a short survey, and some other helpful information. Do note that this event was recorded and will be available on our website in about 2 or so weeks. Finally, thanks to all of you for joining us this evening, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your night, and we hope to see you all in June.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
guys.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody. It was a lot of fun. Hope everybody had fun.